Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. It is Saturday. Been here almost 2 weeks. I'm outside Nancy Guthrie's house. Just kind of found like a quiet place up here off the main drag to talk to you guys. And I kind of wanted to go over everything new that I've learned today in relation to what happened last night. You guys remember last night was this crazy, basically SWAT raid that I got in the middle of. There were 2 people detained at a house about 2 miles from here, 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house. A man and a woman. It's my understanding that it was a mom and son. They went to the house with the SWAT team. It was a massive presence, and the man and the woman, again, I believe it's a mom and a son from what I'm hearing, came out and there was no issue. They basically, came out, didn't resist at all. And were questioned, and then at the same time there was a traffic stop very close by outside of Culver's, which is like a fast food place, where another man was stopped and detained and questioned, and that person also has a connection back to the house where the other 2 were detained, where the SWAT team was. So new today, I am learning from the sheriff. I was texting with the sheriff this morning, the Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos. He said that there were no arrests, that they were working off of a lead, that's what started all of this, and that they have not located Nancy Guthrie. And I learned later in the day that it was a federal search warrant that they were conducting at that house, which makes sense to me because I saw a ton of FBI there, and then I saw even more FBI arrive about an hour after the initial SWAT teams arrived. And it was a federal search warrant, which I'm going to talk to Steve Moore, my friend who's a retired FBI agent who has done a ton of these search warrants in his career, about sort of what he sees, what stands out to him about what happened last night. But just so you guys know, when it's a federal search warrant, that means almost always a judge, a federal judge or federal magistrate has to sign the warrant, which means there has to be things in that warrant that justify the search. And it can't just be something vague usually. And Steve is going to explain that. So while the sheriff is saying there were no arrests, that doesn't mean that this is necessarily over. And that's what my sources are also saying, that they are still investigating whatever brought them to that house last night. And you know that they look at the electronics, likely got DNA from people, and they can try and connect that DNA back to Nancy Guthrie's house. Because remember, we were told that there was DNA found inside Nancy Guthrie's house that does not belong to Nancy Guthrie and does not belong to anyone close to her. So it is a stranger's DNA, perhaps the kidnapper's DNA. So they can now go, when they get these tips and these people that they want to talk to, they can swab them for DNA, and then they can compare to the DNA in the house. And you're going to hear Steve explain this in a second, but what happens is if there's a search warrant on the house, that's different than a search warrant getting someone's DNA. But if they show up to your house with a search warrant, they may just say, hey, can we voluntarily swab your mouth? And if you had nothing to do with it, and you're like, why are you even at my house to begin with? You'd think that most people would cooperate and just let the FBI swab to just sort of like clear them. Because we know they've swabbed a lot of people for DNA so far. The sheriff has said that. Just trying to rule people out, essentially. So all of that is going on behind the scenes involving what we saw last night. And if you want the full debrief on the whole SWAT operation, go back and take a look at my episode from, sorry, I thought I heard something. Go back and look at, I'm like scared of rattlesnakes out here. I know that's crazy. I don't even know if there are rattlesnakes, but like I'm not a desert guy. I'm from Florida, so like every little noise, I'm like used to gators and that kind of thing, but these desert like critters I'm not used to, so that's why I thought I heard something. But if you want the full lowdown on this SWAT situation, go back and look at my video from last night, and I'll walk you through everything that happened. But again, no arrests. It was a federal search warrant, and I am told by sources that there's still an investigation ongoing involving it, although, no one was arrested. They were detained for questioning and let go, essentially. Also, there was a Range Rover, which is interesting, that was also close to where the traffic stop was, that was processed by the FBI very, very carefully and then towed away. And we're trying to find out the relevance of that and how that connects into all of this. So I'll keep you posted on all of that. I'm joined now by Steve Moore, retired FBI agent. It's nice to see you, Steve. I'm still in Arizona, right near Nancy's house right now. But I was really anxious to talk to you because, we were out all night basically following the SWAT team around. We were being respectful. We stayed back, but we ended up in the perimeter where they went into that house, brought a man and a woman out. I believe it was a mother and son. They came out willingly. There was no flashbangs. There was no like use of force. And then there was another traffic stop close by where a man was detained. So there were three people total detained, questioned, and no arrests. I texted with the sheriff this morning, and he said we were following up on leads, no arrests, and we still haven't found Nancy. So, what do you make of it? Because we saw this happen with the Carlos guy from Rio Rico. What do you think is going on here?
There's something about whatever these two situations showed law enforcement. There's something about them that fit their theory of the crime or theory of the suspect is my guess. If it could be somebody's come up with a profile, and both of these guys both of these residences they hit had a mom with her son living with her. So maybe we've got a profile that we're looking for somebody with a certain criminal background or not, who's living with their mom at home. I've seen profiles specifically that said you'll be living with the mom and not the dad. I've even seen one that says he used to live with his mom, but now he's living with an aunt because the mom and he couldn't even live together. They can get very specific. And I'm not saying that if that's their profile, I'm not saying it's their profile, but if it is, I'm not saying that they've got the wrong profile. It's just that not everybody who meets that profile is your bad guy. And so they're having to balance, how close do we think this meets the totality of the circumstances? And are we willing to tire our folks out, frazzle the public and things like that, for another shot at another bite at this apple?
Yeah, and by the way, the sheriff confirmed today that it was a federal search warrant at that house last night also. Does that mean that a judge or a magistrate had to sign off? And does that mean that there had to be some meat on the bones?
Yes, absolutely. Um, the FBI cannot just go out and write a search warrant for themselves and sign it. Actually, the FBI is different. They actually do. Agents write their own search warrants much of the time. They just have to bring it to a judge and have the judge or the magistrate sign it. Um, so this had to have, as you said, some meat on the bones, had to have something that would give a reasonable magistrate, and that's a high bar, by the way, a reasonable magistrate the belief that they would find something related to this crime at that house. So it wasn't just some agent or some deputy getting together and saying, "Hey, you know what? We haven't looked at that house." It's literally uh, thought through, shown to a magistrate. The magistrate agrees and they sign it. So there was something there. There's no doubt about it, but it wasn't what they were looking for.
One thing I've thought about is with Carlos, the guy from Rio Rico, and we went out there too. He was saying how he was a delivery driver and may have been in that area where where Nancy lives. And we know that they're doing all sorts of cell phone tracking, and they can track I think they can track what phones have been close to Nancy's house. Do you think that I mean, you mentioned a profile, but could that also be a way that they are trying to narrow the scope here and come up with targets?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's very possible. And it's kind of funny. Investigators tend to have things that they rely on. Individual guy, one person may rely more on profiling information. One may rely more on cell phone information, something where they feel that they understand it really well, and some agents are really good at that kind of stuff. It's kind of like some baseball players are better fielders than hitters. It's just what you lean on. So it's possible that they're looking at that at the phone records, but again, it can't be just one thing. He was in that area well, there were hundreds of people in the vicinity of that house, that night. So you have to line it up and get two or three at minimum other circumstances that also ties you there. You're looking for patterns.
So for a warrant that they would have had to get, since we know it was a federal search, you're saying they would have to have several things? Like how high is the bar?
It can be frustratingly high, I can tell you. You have to show that the person that you're looking at him for this reason, and you might say hypothetically, his phone was in that area. He's made threats. He has actually been in that house, possibly. He meets this profile, although I don't think a profile is going to be admissible on that. So you would have to show actual verifiable facts that would indicate that this not only is this person involved, but the evidence of that crime would be found at that location. So it would actually be a warrant for the location, not the person, but the person who is living there you would have to explain why that house would contain it.
So maybe the fact that the sheriff is saying no arrests, maybe that doesn't mean that this is over in terms of what they were interested in um with these people and with this house. I mean, could it just be they didn't, make an arrest yet, but there might still be some part of what happened last night that's useful?
Yeah, I mean, unless there's been some statement since then that I have not seen. I, like you, was up most of the night. I think you got less sleep than me, though. I think that what is possible is that they did find evidence of the crime in the house. I'm not alleging that. I'm just saying that they haven't said that this was a complete waste of our time. We're sorry to the people. We don't know how we got this information. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that we've made no arrests. So it's very possible.
And I saw, because I was there, I saw the SWAT teams and sort of the initial, there's probably 2 dozen, and there was some FBI, but 2 dozen law enforcement, I would say, in total that went first to the house. They came out, the man and the woman. And then I would say about an hour later, like a sort of a convoy of FBI agents arrived in black trucks, but also like those evidence kind of units that I also saw at Nancy Guthrie's house a couple days ago. What does that mean that they arrived an hour later?
It's a good question. Wh- um, I took it yesterday to mean in real time that this was a planned operation, that this was a lead that was generated, that was obviously looked at carefully enough. You have to go get a magistrate, warrant from a magistrate. So it was something that they had planned to do. They got everybody lined up. And one of the trademarks of a federal operation is that the cars are literally lined up nose to tail all the way back. It'll be led by the SWAT vehicles if you're going to use them, and then law enforcement to set up roadblocks and stuff. And you'll just come in like a convoy. The fact that the convoy came in later, like an hour later, indicates to me that either that was part of the plan. We're going to secure the area. Then we'll call you in after the interviews. That may have been part of it. Or it was a fast moving thing. And so while the area was getting secured by tactical teams, they were briefing up all the agents and detectives who were going to go in and setting up an ops plan. And then they came in once everybody was lined up.
If they took phones, can they hold on to those for a while?
Yeah, but they don't really need to unless they're looking for physical evidence on the phone. They can mirror those pretty quickly and basically get every single thing that's on that phone onto their drives fairly quickly. So you can return them, uh, unless you're looking for uh, physical evidence on the phone.
And we learned yesterday that they found DNA in Nancy's house that's not Nancy's DNA and not DNA connected to someone in her circle, or, it's a stranger's DNA, it sounds like. So I'm assuming last night they would probably swab these people, their DNA, don't you think? Would that be something that would be important?
Yeah, and unless they had a warrant for that, it would be a voluntary thing. You have to get a warrant for buccal swabs and things like that, where they swab the inside of your mouth. Um, so yeah, excuse me. Yeah, so they losing my voice here.
No, you're fine.
Um, they would have gotten that kind of stuff, DNA evidence, things like that, anything they needed while they were there. And if the people were cooperating, you'd get as much as you can.
Yeah, and I guess if they showed up to my house and I had nothing to do with this, like what Carlos said the other night, why not let them do the swab? I mean, you almost
Yeah.
want them to prove that, hey, I'm not the guy.
You help yourself if you prove to be cooperative. If you don't, because and some people won't because they say you're invading my privacy. You have no right to be. I mean, I've seen this where you say you shouldn't even be here, and I'm not even going to cooperate with you. And you say, listen. You're not helping yourself. This just means we're going to have to do it the hard way. We'll be here longer. Please just cooperate. And but some people get, and I understand, they get offended by the invasion of their privacy.
What about the public perception of this? Because after the Rio Rico search and sort of raid that we were out at, a lot of people were already being hard on law enforcement and the sheriff and the FBI saying, "Gosh, this is like a not a good investigation." And then they're like, "Oh my gosh, this was all a waste." And now we've seen another event where it hasn't resulted in an immediate arrest and it hasn't resulted in finding Nancy. Do you think they're taking that into consideration behind the scenes, or are they just solely focused on the investigation, or do they realize like if they keep doing these raids without any, thing to show for it, like people start to lose faith.
Yeah, and it's funny how law enforcement views that. The FBI is very insular, and their thought on this might be, well, they don't have to follow us to go to these places. We're just doing our job. But the sheriff's department is more invested in the community when you think about it. The sheriff has to be elected. His people are in town every single day, by the dozens, patrolling things like that. So if there's a tension between the citizens of Tucson and the sheriff's office, that really strongly affects the sheriff's office, and it could affect the job of the sheriff. So the sheriff's office is going to be much more attuned to the citizens and their beliefs about this kind of thing and their frustration. The FBI has a culture of putting your head down, getting the job done. And if we screw up, we screw up. But generally, we don't, and we're going to get it done as fast as we can. And dealing with the community is really not our job. We're investigators. So uh, I think in this modern internet world here, where people are following these things so closely, and the press is following it for them so closely. The FBI is, if they're the agency I used to work for, is probably realizing we're going to have to do some work on how we deal with the public and expectations and things like this, because going forward, it's not the same world where Walter Cronkite read the news
Right.
and you just listened. It's almost like everybody has their own home game version.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I mean, you talk about the difference between the sheriff and the FBI too. I mean, the sheriff is elected, sort of has to keep people happy to a certain extent. There's a certain level of like politics involved, where, he probably wants progress in some ways for different reasons than the FBI.
Yeah, my dad coincidentally, when I was like 5 years old, my dad was transferred into Phoenix as an FBI agent. We were there exactly 18 months, and he was transferred to San Francisco, and then he was transferred to New York. I mean, you don't really generally bond with a community in that time. You just work your cases and go. And so, yeah, there is a completely different dynamic between the two agencies. And this explains some of the potential tension between the two agencies. Like, and I'm just speaking hypothetically, but last night, say the sheriff said, listen, we owe the people an explanation of what we're doing here. Let's do a release. And the FBI, who seems to be having more control of the case than the sheriff's department or sheriff's office does, says, we're not going to tell people what we're doing here. We don't want, people to start driving around and looking at this place. We're just not going to make a statement. And the sheriff might have said at that point, you don't understand. This could cost me an election down the line. I have responsibilities that you don't have. And those are the things that cause tension, and may have been part of the reason that the sheriff's department was so invested in sending DNA to a lab in Florida instead of sending it to the FBI lab.
The fact that what we saw last night, you had the house hit, they went into the house, got the people, the two targets out at the same time they did the traffic stop close by with the other man, who I think was related to the people in the house too and had just gone to get food, is what I'm hearing. But it,
Would
it
make
happened
sense.
simultaneously.
Right.
Why would they have done it that way? Like, why wait till that guy's out going to get food and get him and then get the two in the house at the same time? Why not just wait till he got back? Or it seemed like that was planned.
I don't think it necessarily was. I mean, because if you can get somebody at their own home, it's a lot safer for everybody than getting somebody at a traffic stop at a fast food restaurant. You can put people in danger that way. However, when you're dealing with 20 some SWAT operators and maybe 40 or 50 agents, deputies, and evidence teams, once uh, that battleship gets moving, it's hard to stop it. And so when they say we're going to hit the house right at say 6:10 or 8:10 or 9:15, whatever, everything is moving and you just can't stop it at that point, except to say the whole operation's off. You can't just park 40 cars on the side of a major thoroughfare and say, we'll wait, because it's a Friday night. People are out. People are going to call. You're just tipping your hand. And so this is not unusual to say, hey, the person we were looking for just boogied. They likely had a surveillance team watching the house and said, hey, one person just left. And the case agent, if I were the case agent, would say, send somebody with him, follow him, let us know. We'll come hook him up wherever you find him. And so I think that's likely what happened.
I read that the sheriff said this morning that, and it's interesting when he does interviews, he says something a little different each time it seems. But he said, this we could find Nancy in days, or this could take years, which I thought was an interesting comment. What is your sense? I mean, they're obviously making progress. They released the photos, those photos from the camera. They're, doing these raids and search warrants. But do you think they're getting closer?
Yes, I think they're getting closer, and I think the speed at which they're getting closer is rising. Um, it's anybody who's done crossword puzzles or jigsaw puzzles realize that right at the beginning you've just got no help. Once you get just a few words and stuff, you get the frame around it. Now what do we do? And I think they've got the point where they've got the frame done and they're looking for a couple of big pieces. And once you get those pieces, everything seems to fall in line after that. And so I think we're to the point where larger pieces are going to start to fall. And I don't think this is going to go cold. I've been wrong in the past, but I just there's too much out there for this to go very cold with today's technology.
Especially with that DNA that they found. I mean, that seems like I think back to the Idaho case when they did the ancestral DNA. I mean, even if you're not in a database now, they can find your third cousin and then back in that way.
Yeah. Or as I found, I had a third cousin that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, you also you find all sorts of things out through that, and again, I'm like everyone else. I'm hoping that that DNA is from the suspect, but it's not just that. It's the technology to pick up the pick up lost video from that Ring camera.
Yeah, that was
They
a big
are
one.
and being able to find out where things were purchased. And I think that's going to bear fruit. I suspect you're going to find that a lot of things were purchased in the general area, and that helps you zone in on, you say, well, this was purchased at that Walmart, and this was purchased at that other store. And the only area where that Walmart is closest and that other store is closer than other brand stores is in this area. And so you start just zeroing in. And I think they're getting uh, more and more zeroed in every day.
What was the FBI doing inside the house in terms of the search? And people think this is all going to be done like a CSI show so quickly. Like, how long does it all take?
Uh, um, an evidence response team full processing of a scene is not an hour or two thing. It can be days if depending on how much time and how much access they have. About 5 years before I left the FBI, I remember I was assigned as a helicopter pilot for a while, and we had a body found at a national park, extremely rural. And I ended up flying evidence teams in there every day for a week, and they stayed 8 hours every day. That was for a single campsite. When you're talking a home where the amount of space that you need to process, like if you're looking for DNA, that could be as much as little as a skin flake or something
Mm.
like that. Now look at the room around you that you're sitting in, or your car you're sitting in, and find out how long it would take you to find every flake of skin in that room or in that car. So it could be, depending on how exhaustive they're going to be, it could be days, it could be a week.
Would they be looking at these subjects, the people who they're questioning? How important would their criminal histories be in terms of forming a profile?
That's very, very important, potentially huge, because part of the profile indicates. Oh crap! Uh, Part of the profile is based on their propensity to do this. It's not like somebody just comes out of nowhere and says, "I just thought of something, kidnapping." I'm leaving art school, I'm going to try kidnapping. No, it's people who have a propensity to it, and they move in stages towards the crime. So in this case, what we potentially could be looking for is somebody who is a burglar, because kidnapping, especially out of a home, involves a type of burglary. And so you're looking for propensity and history of similar actions, and those things really are predictors of what the person might do, as well as skills they might have. So I would be very surprised, especially after looking at that video, um, if part of a profile didn't include histories of certain crimes that intellectual or intuitively I'd say would be burglary. But again, I'm not a profiler, so I could be wrong on that. But I would say that anytime you see somebody with a long criminal record, you are literally right in the middle of the profile for that person.
We saw a surveillance plane before all this went down. A fixed wing. It was high up, and it was circling. Do you think that was involved? How does that connect back?
Yeah, that was involved almost certainly, because as I said, one thing you never want to do is show up at a house where you want do a search warrant and hook up some people and interview them and find that they're not home. You always need to make sure before you hit the place that the people you're looking for are there. So what they do is they put surveillance teams out, and these are really high-speed, low-drag units. You're not going to see them if they could be on you for days and you wouldn't see them. And one of the things they do is they have planes up, and the planes tell the people down below how to stay out of the view of the car they're following. They half the time during an FBI surveillance, the car that's closest to the person that's being surveilled is not even within sight of it. And the plane just keeps the cars close until the person goes into a residence or something like that, and then the cars can zoom in and pick it up from there. But that would indicate to me not so much that SWAT was using the airplane, although they can. It indicates to me, confirms to me that they did have surveillance on the house, and that plane probably, as that person left and went to the fast food place, went with that individual and 2 or 3 vehicles.
As always, I really appreciate Steve for chatting with me. I appreciate all of you guys for following along with me here on my YouTube channel or on News Nation. And I'll keep you guys posted. I mean, it was a late night. I didn't really sleep much if I seem kind of tired. We were up most of the night with that whole SWAT raid and activity, but just hoping that something breaks soon, you know? I think about Savannah Guthrie and her family, and just hope that Nancy Guthrie is still alive, and I still hope that we will have a positive outcome to this whole thing. And I've told you guys before, but I get so wrapped up in the investigation, like last night, just trying to figure out that whole SWAT situation and be responsible in my reporting with what we were seeing, and I didn't want to interfere with the investigation at all. So sometimes that sort of takes over my mind, and then I try to remember that there's this 84-year-old woman missing, and I think about what her family's going through. And there's now a $100,000 reward. So if anyone has any information, if you recognize the person in those photos, if you know anything, make sure to call the FBI. So I'll be here. I'm going to keep working it. I'll be back at it the rest of it today and tomorrow, and however long this thing goes. So appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you guys later.